Since the NFL draft is over and we have a great overview of the NFL landscape for 2023, I thought it was time for another version of my Dynasty spin on Guy Fieri's Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives to scour through the ugly parts of Dynasty ADP and find those hidden gems among the muck. So welcome in to another episode of Dynasty Fallers, Fill-ins, and Flyers. First up, we have our faller, who in the span of 2 years has gone from basically a top 30 non-quarterback asset in Dynasty to now barely inside the top 150 overall. And I'm talking about Michael Thomas. Now, obviously, there's many reasons for that massive drop in value. He's only played in 10 games since his monster 2019 season 4 years ago. He just turned 30 years old back in March, so the age cliff is extremely real, especially when paired with the lack of playing time since 2020 because of injuries. And then Chris Olave has become the Saints wide receiver one over that stretch of time that Michael Thomas has missed. And these are all very real, very legitimate reasons for his value plummeting in Dynasty, and I don't blame anybody for just being out on Michael Thomas for the rest of his career. However, this entire offseason has been the cheapest that Michael Thomas has ever been, and I'm talking cheap.
I'm just a cheap.
Even back in 2021, when he wasn't playing all season, he was still a top 50 to 60 Dynasty asset in one quarterback leagues. In 2022, that value held as a top 70 to 80 asset, but 2023, well, he's been as low as 175 overall back in January and is now in the 140 to 150 range currently. So like I said, cheap.
I'm just a cheap.
And this is a price that I'm willing to buy in on and just milk whatever talent and fantasy production Michael Thomas can give me to end his career. He still has a role on this offense. The Saints really didn't do anything to hurt his situation. Honestly, it only really improved with Derek Carr now at quarterback. They didn't add any real competition at wide receiver. I know that there's A.T. Perry stands out there, but I don't think a 6th round pick is really going to cause major disruption here, at least early on in 2023. And I know that it's the smallest of sample sizes, but he did play well in the 3 games that he played back in 2022, averaging 5.5 receptions, almost 60 receiving yards, and 17 fantasy points per game, thanks to 3 touchdowns in those 3 games. I don't think Michael Thomas, the NFL talent, is gone and that he's washed up and he's just not producing anymore. I think that he's just been severely unlucky with injuries, and if he can stay healthy this year, he could be a really solid flex or maybe even wide receiver 2 consideration every week that he plays, and I don't think that you can really find that in anybody else in his price range. Since the beginning of May, he's been traded for pennies on the dollar. I'm talking the 305 and the 405, a 2024 third by itself. Someone actually added a 5th round pick to him just to get to the 410, and somebody else was able to trade away Brian Robinson in the 203 for Michael Thomas and the 1.07 in a Superflex league. If you're contending in 2023, I don't know how you're not paying these prices for him, even if he's your wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6. If he starts one game for you and gives you like a top 25 finish, then he just paid for himself. Next up is our fill-in, or should I say fill-ins, plural, because now that the NFL draft is over and we know the lay of the land for depth charts, we can start acquiring handcuff running backs for the 2023 season. To me, this is the most underrated aspect of Dynasty for teams looking to truly become contenders and raise the probability of going the distance in your league. Do not underestimate rostering handcuffs in Dynasty.
Well, maybe next time you will estimate me.
There are a ton of guys that fit this category, but if I had to highlight one specifically, it would be Keaontay Ingram of the Arizona Cardinals. And I actually just highlighted why I love buying James Conner in a recent video on here too. I'll link that video at the end if you want to check it out. But essentially, everything that I love about James Conner applies to Keaontay Ingram if Conner were to get hurt, which we know that he's been prone to just over basically his entire career. But this Cardinals team is going to be really bad this year without Kyler Murray, and they're going to lean on their running game to take the pressure off of Colt McCoy or whoever it is that their quarterback is, with Kyler Murray out. I mentioned in the video about James Conner that in the 4 weeks after Kyler tore his ACL, Conner averaged 20 touches per game. It was on a 17-game pace of over 1,800 total yards, 13 touchdowns, and 100 targets. If Conner were to get hurt, Keaontay Ingram should easily be the next man up and getting that kind of volume. The only other backs that they have currently are Corey Clement and Tyson Williams, and Ingram is almost an exact replica of James Conner in terms of size, speed, receiving ability. He is completely capable of being a 3-down back for any stretch at a time. And if we have, say, even like a month, 4 games worth of Keaontay Ingram being the guy with James Conner out with an injury, and Ingram's giving you like top 20, maybe even top 15 weeks, that not only could save your season if you yourself are dealing with injuries and bye weeks, but that could vault you to a first round bye in your playoffs, which is extremely important in terms of winning your actual Dynasty championship. And Keaontay Ingram is just so cheap right now. It's not even worth mentioning trades to get him. He could be a throw-in in your next deal, or you guys could be doing your rookie drafts right now and you get down to like the 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds of your rookie drafts and someone wants their favorite sleeper and they want your pick to take him, then you get Keaontay Ingram and they get Elijah Higgins or whoever the heck it is. That's a huge, huge win for you. And like I said, there are a ton of handcuffs out there to get at these same prices. It doesn't have to be just Keaontay Ingram. I'm talking Gus Edwards, Jerome Ford, Zamir White, Samaje Perine, Raheem Mostert, and Jeff Wilson, Jalen Warren, Devin Singletary. There's a bunch of guys in here that you can do the exact same thing with. Get them thrown in on your next trade. Get them for a 3rd, 4th, 5th round rookie pick. If you want to compete this year, you should be actively acquiring and stashing these guys now before injuries start happening in offseason programs and training camps. And if one of those guys happen to become the starter, then you just lost out on so much opportunity, or you gained all that opportunity because you already had them on your roster. And then lastly, we have our flyer, or again, Fliers, plural. And I'm really just scraping the bottom of the barrel here with both of these picks, but I'm talking about the backup running backs on the Dallas Cowboys, Ronald Jones and Malik Davis. And I know this is really gross, but hear me out for a second, because as of right now, the Cowboys depth chart is currently Tony Pollard, newly drafted Munchkin Deuce Vaughn from the Purple Brick Road, and then Davis and Ronald Jones. That's it. This is a team that's lost almost 250 touches from Ezekiel Elliott in 2022, which is a huge chunk of volume just sitting out there for the taking. Even if we assume that Tony Pollard becomes a 300 plus touch guy, which I don't even think is even a possibility, but just assume that that happens, that's still about 200 touches left over from Zeke. Someone is going to have to fill that void, either as the 1B to Tony Pollard's 1A, or still the just straight RB2, but a potential 150 touch RB2, which is still very valuable for fantasy. Now, I don't think it's going to be Deuce Vaughn. He's really small, and I just think that he's mostly going to be a special teamer as a rookie. So unless the Cowboys sign Zeke Elliott or Fournette or Kareem Hunt or someone else, whoever it is, then it's going to be Malik Davis or Ronald Jones in that role. Davis is a second-year player who had a few games last year with 7, 8, 10 carries, had a couple of receptions in those games too. He was fine, nothing crazy, actually kind of underwhelming on the ground efficiency-wise. He was much better as a receiver. And then Ronald Jones, I know is like the grossest name that I could possibly say right now, but people forget that he was a top 20 fantasy running back in 2020 in Tampa Bay. He rushed for almost 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns on under 200 carries, added another 28 receptions. And then last year on the Chiefs, he only had one game with meaningful snaps, and that was in week 18, but he rushed for 45 yards and a touchdown on 10 carries in that game. I'm not going to say that he or even Malik Davis are good running backs, but I think that they both can get the job done if needed and can do what Zeke Elliott did last year, which was back-end RB2 numbers, splitting time with Tony Pollard. And with that upside of being like 90 to 95% Ezekiel Elliott from 2022 and possibly being a top 30, top 40 fantasy running back, I'm willing to acquire either or both of these players because they're both just insanely cheap. They might honestly be on waiver wires right now, Malik Davis especially, so check your waiver wires for them. But again, just like the handcuff prices, I'm talking throw-ins in your trades, 4th and 5th rounders in your rookie drafts. They shouldn't cost any more than that. But if you want to know about 4 other players that I think you should be acquiring right now in Dynasty, then you should check out this video right up here.